Joining us today is Hal Feder. With over 30 years as a global leader at Ford Motor Company and as a past president of RMA Automotive, Hal intimately knows the automotive industry. Today, he is the owner of a Murphy Business Sales franchise, where he helps business owners across all industries navigate the M&A process, with a particular specialization in helping car dealerships execute successful exits. Hal, it's great to have you here.
Hal, welcome to How I Bought This. I'm glad you could have you on because I really don't know anyone who's better at talking about how to buy a car dealership than you. And I want really our audience to understand your backstory before we kind of go into the minutia of buying and selling car dealerships. So can you tell me a little bit about first your experience at Ford?
Well, I was in marketing and sales with Ford, so I was calling on dealers and did a lot of franchise work. They call it market representation at Ford, but taking one dealer in and another one out. Toward the end of my Ford career, I was running fleet in the U.S., so I was negotiating with Hertz and Budget and Enterprise, selling tricky negotiations, because in the morning I was selling the car for the highest price, and in the afternoon I was negotiating to buy it back for the lowest price. Then they moved me to South Africa, and I ran Ford South Africa, which was life-changing in a lot of ways, but I got involved in union negotiations down there, negotiations with purchasing companies for materials. Came back, ran sales for a while, so now I'm approving the market rep deals that I was developing earlier in my career, and then ran export for Ford. So I got involved in dealer networks, setting up dealer distributors in 84, international markets. Left Ford and
and
really
that's when you went to RMA, right? And that's just
and
more
then I
your
became a
retail
dealer.
experience.
So now I'm on the other side of the table. I'm running a bunch of retail dealerships in Southeast Asia and other places. We had a Chevrolet store in Afghanistan. I did not visit that one. We had JLR in Kenya, and I spent a lot of time in Kazakhstan, believe it or not. I got a really an appreciation for the dealers, even more so than I was at Ford, because I saw, from the dealer's eyes, how a company like Ford makes decisions. Left, came back to the States, failed retirement, if I'm honest, and then started and brokering, and I specialize in dealerships, franchise dealerships mostly. About probably 35% of my business is franchise dealerships, but I like the other stuff too. I like learning about new categories, and there's some interesting business models out there. So it's all about learning every day, in this business.
I feel like we could have a whole 2-hour show about selling cars in Thailand, but I don't know if that's the direction we're going to go. Really want to dig in here on why car dealerships are such great businesses to own and operate.
Yeah, the first answer, I guess, it's a strong return on investment, right? It's 35%, 30% return on operating investment. We know that in COVID, they were essential businesses. So, people need to move and they need to get their cars serviced. So they stayed open through COVID. And that was a tremendous upswing in business, because cars were short, because production was constrained and pricing went through the roof. I guess the other one is they just spent a lot of cash. Someone asked me the other day, why do these dealers keep buying more stores? Because they don't know what else to do with all their cash. They generate so much cash that they have to put it somewhere, and they know where to put it, right? They put it in other stores. So there's brand consolidation going on, geographic consolidation going on, and it's driving a lot of activity in the marketplace. And it's just fun. Look, cars are fun, right? And so it's a dynamic, ever-changing business. It's a little bit of fashion and a little bit of Formula One thrown together.
So if I were to recap this, is one, they're very resilient businesses. Even during the pandemic, when the world was flipped up on its head, the car businesses were doing great. People need to go places. Transportation is huge, particularly in the U.S. 2, financially, they're a great business. They make a lot of money. And then 3, people love cars. It's just a fun industry to be in. Cars are always changing, and that are in the industry are in it generally for the right reason. They love the product. And now with the whole dealership model, there's various different models within the dealership model here. Do you buy the real estate? Is there no real estate? Franchise, independent, used, new, service centers, things like that. Can you kind of walk through various different ways different dealerships function and their business models?
I guess the first delineation is the franchise dealership versus the pre-owned or independent model, right? So those are two very different animals, different stripes, and the pricing for those are done differently. And we can get into that if you want. But every deal really stands alone. Most of the dealers are real estate barons as well. They own lots of real estate. They like to control the real estate because real estate is, it's an appreciating asset, right? And if you've got the right spot in the right town, you're going to be able to control your rent and you're going to be able to dictate, your future. That's not to say that a lot of dealerships are leased as well. So there's no real set rule, but most of the successful dealers have control of the real estate in a separate company that leases back to their business company.
And I think another thing to understand too, as like a total new person to the dealership model, is how their inventory is financed and stored here. So really high level, like what is inventory floor plan financing and how are dealerships using it?
Yeah. So the OEMs, most of them have captive finance organizations that exist to underpin and support their dealer networks with wholesale financing, floor plans, Ford Credit, GM, etc. There are also other outside entities that do that, Ally and the like. So the new cars are 100% floor plan generally, and most dealers also floor plan their used vehicles, right? Because again, why tie up money that you don't have to? These are quick moving assets, ideally turning every 30 days or 45 days. So why put your cash there when you can, finance it? And there are all kinds of programs out there as well, interest-free periods. And then if you floor with Ford Credit, you get special retail financing, zero for, 72 months or whatever. The used vehicle operators, the pre-owned operators, have a harder time with the establishment of floor plan. They have to demonstrate profitability and tenure and resilience before a bank will take a risk. Think about it for the bank. It's a lot of administration, right? These are assets that move. Banks like assets that are fixed, right? Like real estate or like pieces of equipment. These cars all have wheels and they all have titles. And there's a lot of administration and cash in transit in an automotive environment. So it's not for every bank. And so the big OEMs have dedicated finance organizations to support their vehicle operation.
And I think this is a kind of a unique piece of this, like these dealership models, because oftentimes the inventory, like one of the largest items on someone's balance sheet, is free for the dealership because they're turning the inventory over before like interest payments happen. So this is contributes to point 2 you made in my first question of why some of these businesses are so lucrative.
Yeah, because if you get 45 days of free floor plan and you sell the car in 20 days, then the factory actually owes you money for the interest that you didn't use, right? And they change those programs all the time, by the way. So in COVID, you would sell the vehicle on the motor convoy before it even hits your floor plan. And so whatever floor plan assistance you were getting was another chunk of cash that goes right into the back pocket. So there's a lot of different places. That's the other thing we didn't talk about. There's a lot of different places to make money in a dealership too. You got new and used and parts and service and F&I, finance and insurance and warranty and body shop in about a third of the cases. So fleet rental, they rent cars now. They've got service loaners, but they also have paid loaners. So it's there's a lot of profit centers.
It's complex, I think. It's one of those things that you see, like a lot of times these OEMs might not have huge margins on sedans and things like that, but the dealerships are still making money in other parts, or they're moving people up in the various different fleets, it seems like. One of the things that I keep seeing, though, and like macro trends with car dealerships, is like new players and new models. So like you see the Tesla model where you buy directly from the OEM, or like Carvana is buying up cars like crazy and they're delivering cars to your house and picking up cars from your house. Are you seeing any changes to the traditional business models here for car dealerships?
Well, Tesla's kind of a unique animal in the sense that the states all have pretty strict franchise laws that restrict OEMs from selling direct. Tesla was able to beat that in a lot of different states because of the EV nature. Okay, of the, and so they were able to get around that pretty successfully, more successful than a lot of other people who have tried it. VW is trying it now with Scout. Okay, they're re-energized former AMC brand Scout. They want to sell direct. A lot of dealers are making huge protests with their state governments because they don't want that to happen. So it's not as easy as Tesla made it seem, but they were able to do that. I think there's some disadvantages, real disadvantages to not having a dealer network in terms of service. These things are, there's heat, there's friction, there's moving parts. They're machines, and machines need maintenance, and machines break. And the franchise system is it's got tentacles everywhere, right? I mean, you can get to a dealer just about any direction in 6 to 8 minutes and get your car serviced. Whereas the Tesla model of direct, they only had these, service centers that were covering a lot of different geography. So customer convenience. I mean, people will drive 2 or 3 hours to buy the car, but they want to drive 10 minutes to get the car serviced, right? Carvana is different because it's used vehicles, right? Now that's then you've got the Costco relationships now, people selling through Costco or Amazon Prime. And so we're seeing a bit of a revolution in the way these cars are delivered. The other thing that's unique, when you go to buy a new refrigerator, you don't take your old refrigerator in and say, hey, what do you give me for this? Right? So you got two transactions here in one. You've got the used car, what do you give me? And then you got the new car. And both, and they're high ticket, high dollar transactions. So you need financing, right? And there's insurance and all that. So it's not like buying a book or a garden rake, through Amazon Prime. You dial it up and you can have it maybe by tonight, right? I mean, if you're near one of those distribution centers and there's a truck coming your way, they throw the rake on there and you got a rake. You can start raking in the morning. Cars are, a bit different, and people like to drive their cars, right? People like to sit in and drive the car and smell it and feel it, and touch it. And so it's a bit of an interesting transaction relative to the other things that are going on. And servicing these things it's just buying, it's easy. Servicing it and having that convenience is really unique feature of this whole industry.
Yeah, speaking to touch and feel, I just saw this ad that Volvo is running, how they'll fly you to Sweden to pick up the car, drive it. You can drive it all around in Sweden for a 2-week paid vacation, hotel and flights. And then if you buy the car, they'll ship the car to you.
That's right.
Which I was like, it's such an intimate purchase.
Yep.
For the kind of the flip side of people who are buying dealerships or looking to buy dealerships, who are these people right now? Is it private equity groups? Is it individuals?
Yeah. Yes and yes. Yeah. I mean, you've got individuals. I'm seeing a number of pre-owned dealers wanting to get into the franchise system because they want access to those floor plans that are harder to get on the used vehicle side. They want access to the banks. Banks will, the retail financing is readily more available to the new car dealer than the used car dealer. You're seeing the consolidation wave. It was Group One and CarMax and all, Lithia and AutoNation buying up stores. And now you're seeing that move down into regional groups now. So you got big players that are just regional groups, right? So they buy southeastern Pennsylvania, and they've got Ford and BMW and Chevrolet and Porsche, and they have a whole portfolio, and they get scale and they get synergies through this. They can develop people amongst these brands. They can do common advertising, digital presence and back office. All the administration is done centrally. So you've got one accounting office that's handling 6 or 8 or 10 stores, right? And so, and all the paperwork and all the cash and all the stuff that we talked about earlier in terms of moving parts that are going on, and you do it one time instead of in 7 different times. The top 150 dealerships now represent about 26% of all cars sold. All right. So there's still a lot of fragmentation, but that number has increased dramatically over the last 5-10 years. There is consolidation. Individuals, there's private equity money. There's a lot of powder in the market available. They're getting into it. Used vehicle owners that want into new, they're coming from everywhere. And there's probably 15, 18, 20 buyers for every listing. Okay. So it's a seller's market big time. COVID was the peak of the financials. So we've normalized off of COVID, but it's still higher than it has been historically. But what's really underpinning the pricing is supply and demand. There're just a lot more buyers than sellers. And so sellers are benefiting. The financials may not be there, but if you don't want my deal, then go to the next one. Oh, there isn't another one? I guess you want mine. I mean, it comes back to them. So I think there's a lot of supply and demand that's driving the multiples.
Yeah. I mean, if there's a shortage of supply, then there's not that many dealerships for these buyers to buy up. Beggars can't be choosers.
If you want a deal, you got to pay. I mean, especially if you're trying to get in. If you've got 10 stores, you can be a little bit more selective, and it may not fit your. I've got 6 of those, and I want I want the Mazda or the Volvo that I don't have. I've got the others, so you can sit back. But if you're trying to break in, you have to pay the price.
And then for these buyers that are buying dealerships, do they have to have some sort of certification or like a training program from Ford if they're buying a Ford dealership, or can anyone buy a dealership?
No, it's quite prescriptive. It varies by manufacturer, but they're really looking for, of course, the capital. You have to have the capital to not just buy the store, but then to properly capitalize it to working capital standards from the OEM. So you have to have capital. You have to have the operational resume, and they're looking for sales effectiveness, market share. They're looking for CSI, and they're looking for the working capital. And then you have to have a strong customer resume in terms of owner loyalty and customer satisfaction, and then character. So those are the 4: capital, capability, character, and customer satisfaction. If you don't have those, you can still buy a deal, but you're going to have an operating partner, not necessarily an equity partner, but an operating partner that you give managerial authority. I've got one deal going through right now. They've never owned a dealership before. They've got the capital, but they're interviewing candidates to be their general manager in order for them to get approved. So it's a marriage of the money and the experience necessary to get the approval. Used vehicles, used vehicle dealerships, you don't have to go through that OEM filter.
Yeah. And just real quick here for a newbie like myself, are most of these dealerships bought and sold with an asset purchase or stock purchase?
Mostly asset. I mean, I've done some stock sales, but there's some liability obviously in these stores. So you can do the reps and warranties and get by with a stock sale, but most of them are asset sales, so that you don't have to worry about what someone said, or a car that was a brake job that went bad that ends up hurting someone. You do an asset sale. I'd say 98% are asset sales.
I think there's a thought here, because there is such demand to own car dealerships, and you said the supply is very finite, to build a dealership versus buy a dealership. I'm assuming that if you're trying to sell new cars, there's a lot of hurdles you have to go through and relationships with the OEM. But from a used car dealership, there's probably, I would guess, minimal hurdles you have to jump through to start your own dealership. So how do you think about buying versus building?
Well, I mean, again, big differences between new and used. The new it's very hard to get an ad point. They call them ad point when there's a new dealership, a new Kia dealership in the western part of Sioux City, Iowa or something. 100 people that want that, right? And they're talking to Kia about that. Hey, if you ever do it, I'll do this or that, or I'll build you a new facility or whatever. But a used vehicle, basically you just get a dealer's license. You go to the state and figure out what you need to get a dealer's license. Most of them require a building and that you need to be open, 8 hours a day for 5 days. You have to meet the certain state requirements, but it's not hard to get a dealer's license. You need a place of business, a place to to store vehicles and display vehicles. You don't necessarily need a parts and service department like you would on the new side, but you're also going to be having to recondition cars. Not every used car that gets turned in is ready for resale. So you have to send them off somewhere to get things
Clean
fixed
them
or
at least.
cleaned up and reconditioned for a better price, right? You can spend $300 on reconditioning and get $3,000 more in pricing because you've, fixed whatever, torn seats or, a noisy transmission or whatever. So it's build or buy. I mean, it's just different on the news side, you're pretty much, relegated to buying an existing store. I mean, there are some ad points every year, but very, very few, In fact, it's going the other way. OEMs are trying to consolidate, just like dealers are consolidating. The OEMs are trying to, they're buying back stores. There's a lot of right of first refusals that are going on, right? So I have a deal, I sold a deal, and then the manufacturer matched the deal. The dealer got its money, but the buyer was sent away with nothing, and because they closed the point and reassigned it to the neighboring dealers. They've done that and are doing that in some cases.
And then looking at these deals, and I know we talked about a few of these different business models, what does a healthy dealership look like?
Yeah, there's a whole list of KPIs that, we look at, percentages of gross, percentages of net profit. I mean, the bottom line is, on average, if you're above like 4% return on sales, you're an excellent performing store. 5 to 7 is like tremendous. Service absorption is another key. What percentage of your fixed operations is covering your fixed cost? So if you're at an 80% service absorption, it says 80% of your fixed costs are covered by your parts and service operation. So every vehicle sale, or very few, by the middle of the month, every new vehicle sale goes right to the bottom line because your costs are covered through the back end. So service absorption, you got per new vehicle retailed, and there are all these comparisons, George, versus a group. Every one of these metrics that I'm reeling off, you can measure yourself against the averages for the brands in your area and nationally. And there's just tons of data that you can benchmark yourself on. It's interesting. We were getting into this a minute ago. Like, the contribution to gross profit is high in the vehicle sections, but the contribution to gross margin is low. So I'll give you an example. New vehicles, the contribution to gross profit is 15 to 20% of the total dealership, but the typical gross margin, what you retain, is 5 to 7%. But in the back, in the service, it's 20 to 25% up front, but it's 75% on the margin. So it makes it up a smaller percentage of the total dealership in terms of the revenue, because the ticket item on the car is so high. And the RO on the service is so low, but relative to the margin that you retain from that sale, either car or service, it's a lot different. So that's why the money in this business, and it's ironic, the money really is made in the back, in the parts and service, and in the used vehicles. And the used vehicles, because there's no sticker on a used vehicle, right? So the new vehicle, and everybody's got the black F-150 Lariat, okay? Everybody's got it, and they paid the same price and they got the same rebate. But not everybody's got the 2019 F-150 used vehicle with 35,000 miles that was only driven to church on Sunday, right? So people will drive, 500 miles or 1,000 miles to buy that vehicle because there's only one of them like that with that kind of mileage. So it's ironic that the OEMs want new vehicle experience to get one of these things, but the money is made in used vehicles and parts and service. And I have to explain that to people every day, why that is. But that's what they're looking for. They want people that have sold new vehicles, but it's the used vehicles and the parts and service is what is going to make them ultimately successful or not.
If you put yourself in like a buyer's shoes and you were like, I'm looking to buy a car dealership, are you looking at this distribution of revenue between new vehicle sales, used vehicle sales, service, financing? I'm assuming there's like other categories that I'm missing.
you're looking at all those metrics, but you're really looking for three things. I mean, if you boil it down, what makes the difference between average and premium? And it's three things. It's clean financials. It's financials that are connected. You know, the balance sheet and the income statement talk to one another, right? They come from the same, you know, if you've got the P&L on accrual and you got the taxes on cash, they reconcile, right? I mean, there's no frozen capital. You know, there's not too many parts. There's not too many used cars, right? There's no money laying around anywhere. You know, so clean financials, really important. Secondly would be owner independency. So the store is not, the results of the store are not being counted on but by just one person or two people, right? It's a team. You got management depth. The people are cross-trained, they're professional, and they can run the business with the owner over, you know, on vacation in Italy, right? And then the third thing that I think really distinguishes businesses are structured, institutionalized processes, right? We have a process for customer acquisition. We have a process for customer satisfaction and dispute resolution. We have an employee handbook. We have a vacation policy. We have a CRM. We have data. We leverage AI. We have systems that it's not what we do, it's how we do it. Okay. So that when a buyer comes in and looks at this business as, my gosh, the financials, I can trust the financials. I believe the financials. The business is not dependent on the old owner. He could leave and it's still going to be, and they know how to run the business. They built a structure that runs the business. So it's not the people running the business, it's the structure running the business and the people managing the structure and the systems and the policies. Those three things, if I'm a buyer on any business, but especially a car business, those are the three things that get premium value in my mind.
So if I'm looking at a deal book or a deal teaser or a confidential information memorandum, SIM, a buyer should be looking at, is there clean financials? What role is, and what role is the owner playing, quite frankly?
Yeah. Owner or general manager. Yeah. The key people. I mean, you should be able to take them out of the store for long periods of time and look at the financial statement, not seeing any ill effect.
Yeah. And then the third, like you were saying, is there's processes and procedures in place. And this would just make your life so much easier as a buyer. If you buy the business, you have the playbook that
you do. Yeah. The architecture of the business, and then you can just sit back and you can think about growth, right? Because the railroad's running, you know, and you can just start to look at new track, you know, not, you know, the railroad's going to run with or without you. And now you can sit back and you can work on the community relations. You can work on different service offerings, adjacencies, you know, you can add different types of services, car washes or upfit shops or the like, you know. So the business is an engine that's humming and you're just looking to, you know, rev it up even more.
Yeah.
With growth.
I mean, what we've outlined pretty significantly, I think, throughout these first 30 plus minutes is a dealership has multiple revenue drivers and there's different levers that owner can pull here. Because from the outside looking in, if I look at a car dealership, I see, okay, the lot's this size, this is how many cars they can fit on it. Is there a synthetic cap for revenue? And what you're telling me is no.
Well, I mean, capital, facility, and people, those three things can constrain growth, right? I mean, you don't have the capital. I mean, these things I said it generates a lot of capital, but it also takes a lot of capital. Let me just give you an example. You got it. I always talk about Ford. I don't know why. I guess it's 30 years. So I got an F-150 sitting out there, right? And someone comes in and buys it and they trade in an Explorer, right? So they take your new car, you got to pay the new car off, right? But they only, you know, they're financing it, right? So you've got half of the money that, you know, they put $2,000 down, but you got to pay off the F-150 that's 60 grand. Okay. And the money that you need to pay that thing off is sitting in the Explorer that you just took in on trade, right? So you do that like 4 times a day and you're out $300,000. Okay. So until you liquidate that used car, which by the way is going to happen again because someone's going to put a trade in on the used car, you follow me? And there's always this cash generation that's going on in the background. And that's probably why not everybody can get into one of these things. It does take some capital and some liquidity. It takes seed money to get that fulcrum spinning so that you can enjoy the cash that spends off of these things. It's one of those, it takes money to make money, and that couldn't be truer in the car dealership.
Seems like too what we're talking about here, particularly what you highlighted in the first point of like having procedures in place as the owner stepping away from the business. What's actually happening with this turnover of cash is effectively what you're happening. A lot of this stuff is uncovered during like a broker, buyer, owner meeting when the connection's happening.
Yeah. When you'll generate for an OEM deal, you're going to generate a sales and profit forecast, which is going to generate an operating investment and a working capital guide. And that's the capital that you need in order to be able to generate the sales that you're forecasting on new and used, right? And then you go out and get your floor plans to support your inventories, but you still need capital to pay vehicles off, because you've got a lot of money sitting around on the car lot. You'll take the used car that you take in, you're going to floor plan, you'll get that taken care of, but you still have to, you're doing a lot of this. You're doing a lot of juggling cash. You're taking cash in, but you're taking cash out. You just have to make sure there's more coming in than going out.
And then when a buyer is under LOI to buy one of these type businesses, how is due diligence occurring to make sure that they understand all this? Because there's a lot of moving parts going on.
Yeah, just the typical stuff you would look at for any business, like the tax returns or the general ledgers and the bank statements to make sure that the numbers tie in. But you'd also look at those operating metrics that I was mentioning earlier. And there's pages of them by and you do a deep dive on, okay, I'm going to look at the new car and see how they're doing there. I'm going to look at the used car, parts, service. You almost have 4 or 5 different business due diligences going on here, diving into the numbers. In addition to just looking at the overall, you want to look at the social media report card. You may even have to mystery shop the store to see if those institutionalized processes are really institutionalized. I had that happen a couple of times. I sent 4 guys in there and they got 4 different, this guy was good, that guy was good, this person was not so good, this person didn't even show up. You do a lot with everything. It's all about quality of earnings, right? I mean, you just break it all down and you look at the, look at the pay plans and make sure that the pay plans there's a balance between fixed salary and commission, right? If they're all on salary, not a good thing in the car business, because you want to pay for performance, right? So you want the employees to make a lot of money, but while they're making a lot of money, you want the dealership to make a lot of money. There's conventions out there for different positions in these dealerships. And so, the general manager will be given half of his money in salary, but the other half will come from hitting these different metrics that you set up. And then you may even give him a percentage of the profits, because he's made it happen for you.
And there's probably similar things for the service department too, you're tracking?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You want to look at productivity back there. You've got so many stalls, so many lifts, and it's, the technicians are, every job, every RO has a book, this is an hour job. And if that technician can do that hour job with quality in 40 minutes, then he can do the next job. Right. And so now you're getting, excess pay for the time that you've got allocated in that stall. Right. And then the opposite can happen too. Right. It's an hour job and it takes an hour and a half. So now, we can't charge, we've got 30 minutes in that case of lost revenue. So you want people on the metrics that are driving the performance of the department and then the dealership.
Are there any like commonalities you see where like this is what often kills a deal? So, I mean, the why I'm asking this question is if an owner knows, like, if this kills a deal, like I should fix this early on in my process.
Totally. Like anything, you want your dealership to be fully staffed. A lot of dealers, well, I'm not going to hire a general manager because I want the buyer to be able to pick the that's really not the right way of thinking about it. You really want the buyer to come in and say, wow, I don't really have to do anything. There's no problems here. I'm not buying a problem. I'm buying an opportunity, right? So if there's too many parts or too many used cars, I mean, I've got a whole list of things that, preparing the dealership for sale. You want to get all of your compliance issues handled. You want to update your employee handbook. You want to unfreeze all this frozen capital. You want to fix the facility. If the lot has got potholes and there's no customer parking and there's the letters have all the, mildew and mold on them. You really want to think of it as your house, right? And you're putting your house on the market and you want to show your house in the best possible light. So not just cosmetically, but also financially. And so there's some steps that we would go through before we would even talk about listing it that they have to get ready to address. Right. And we would go through that list pretty aggressively and diligently to make sure that they're ready to get the most out of the business. Right. Cause it's going to come back to haunt you if you don't.
And then when a buyer takes control of a business, so they purchase agreements signed and they're in charge now, is there anything that a buyer should be top of the buyer's mind? I would think, I don't know, growing up, we always bought cars from the same family, same Ford dealership every single time, every leased cars. And then when I bought my first car, we were always going to the same place. I could see if the ownership changed or something like that, we might have gone to a different one. There's a lot of loyalty in the car business.
Right.
What should buyers be cognizant of right after they acquire the business?
It's an excellent question, and one that doesn't get enough attention. My process, my recommended process, they don't always follow it, would be to have buyer and seller, and I sit down with them and we talk about this as we get closer, to develop a communication strategy, a messaging strategy for employees, for suppliers, and ultimately for clients. And the best process is for the outgoing dealer to have it. Well, first of all, bring the managers in. You want to bring the managers in first, your direct reports, maybe 4 or 5 people, and you announce the sale with the new team there. And it goes something like, we've talked to a lot of different people, but we have found buyers that share our core values and are motivated to grow the business. And so while this change is obviously going to be challenging and difficult, because change always is, I think you're going to find the new buyers to be great caregivers and caretakers of the culture and the business that we've built together. And then the new buyer will say a few words that echo that. And then your management team now has been briefed. Okay. So they feel like they're part of a special group, right? Because the employees, think about it, they're going to come to their manager and say, well, what do you think about that? And if the manager hasn't had that initial meeting, they're going to say, shit, I don't know. This is going to be, I don't know. So win over the management team first, and then have a group employee meeting. Same thing, both outgoing and incoming dealer there. And then, and this is what they don't do very much, the new guy has one-on-one meetings over the first couple of weeks with each individual at the store and shows empathy and caring and talks to them about their career path and their goals and their situation, because everybody's got a different situation. Some people are, at the end of their careers. Some people are at the beginning of their careers. Some people have, they're caring for aging parents or putting kids through school. And so you want to understand that. And the goal of that meeting is to make them feel, it's just one word, care. I care. I care about you. I care about you. And you want to build that respect and that trust up front. And when you do that, typically you don't have any defections, because people are like, wow, this is, I've seen it many times where it's like, I can't believe you're here. We're glad you're here. This guy, he was tired. He wasn't investing anymore. We haven't had a raise in 5 years. We're not doing any digital marketing. And ask have the new owners ask the team, hey, what can I do? What can I do today to make your job better? What growth opportunities are? You can get so much information from the employees about what you need to do back in the back office. So if you do that, and it's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's so critical. And it's I mean, I've seen it. Here are the keys, good luck. That's not the way to transition any business, but especially a car business.
It's funny, this story reminds me of a case study that I did once where it was like a consulting project and they were evaluating a dealership and it was the service department, and the service department was underperforming. So the management team bought them like new tools and they had the fanciest tools, but they were still underperforming. And then finally the management team goes to the service department to be like, what's happening here? Like, what do you need? And they're like, honestly, we would just like a door in our service department to get to, this facility. We spend all of our time walking around the building. And they were like, oh my goodness.
Right, exactly. And so then the door goes in next week and it's like, a simple thing. They just put a door, right? And it saved the guy, countless hours.
I think it's like really good advice there of getting to know the team almost on like a relationship level. Because as a buyer, you probably have all these ideas of, I want to do this, this, and this to grow the business. But before you actually do that, it probably is helpful to build those personal relationships with the team and key players before you execute on that vision.
No question. Yeah. Yeah. So it's one of those things that the broker or the advisor should really take some time and make sure that that's part of the closing process or pre-closing process. It doesn't necessarily matter when you do it. I think doing it before closing is a good idea. If closing is imminent and everything's done, the financing is done. I think when you do it after, employees tend to feel like, you haven't been honest with them, right? You've kind of done something without their knowing it, and certainly you want to bring that manager circle of trust in before closing.
Yeah, Hal, I feel like you've convinced me to go out there and buy a dealership.
I've got a couple of listings. We can put you in a new dealership here. We got what, 5 minutes left. We can do it real quick. So no.
Well, I found my operator. You can be my operator for the dealership. Yeah. Well, again, Hal, I really appreciate the time.